So this is the story of how I built a tavern floor for my D&D group. So all of my building inspiration for all of my D&D stuff is from mostly Black Magic Craft. You're going to see a lot of similarities in the way that I did things with this and the way that he builds, but also Wylock. I typically use his whole 1.25 grid type thing so that I can add walls, because I like adding walls to all of my floors and everything that I build. But also, I have to give thanks to Runehammer, who used to be Drunkens and Dragons, I believe, because he is the one that got me into building any of this stuff in the beginning. He's the first one that I came across, so special thanks to him. So this board is 9 by 9 in squares, but because I use the 1.25 grid type thing, it's actually 11.25 inches. Even though I didn't actually use a grid on this one, I did do the wood, plank look, so I didn't really add tiles because I don't necessarily believe that you need a grid to play, especially with a pattern like this. I did each plank is about half an inch wide, so just every two is going to be an inch, every two is going to be a square. It's pretty easy to do without having a grid. So right here I'm making the lines for each individual board, and whenever you're doing this you want to make sure that you start on the same side, because even if there is a little bit of a change, you're going to end up with diagonal, like if your board isn't perfectly square, you're probably going to end up with some diagonal lines, even if just a little bit. So always make sure to do it starting on the same side. So whenever I'm carving in to pink foam for whether it's dungeon tiles or whatever, I like to use the Sharpie ink pens, because not only are you making that line, that indentation, but the ink inside of it actually eats away at the foam a little bit, so you get a really nice line. Better than if you just used like a pencil or something. This part's really simple. This is just me making the boards, the planks, look more like planks instead of just lines across the board. I did it the way that I did it. You could do it longer boards if you want. I tried to make it sporadic so that each board looked individual. They weren't all the same length. Some were shorter, some were longer, and I feel like that gives it a little bit more realistic effect. I'm adding in the holes they're supposed to represent like nails holding in the boards. This is a lot more than you would think. On this board alone, I think I counted them out. I had like 350 holes in this, and this is actually the part of the whole project that I dislike the most. I made the holes too big. I used a pencil with just the lead sticking out. Use something smaller like a pen, a small pen, or just something smaller than lead of a pencil, because the main thing that I was worried or disappointed in was the holes were just too big and didn't necessarily look like what they were supposed to anymore. You'll see I had a slight fix for it, but it wasn't cheap. So this is a really simple effect. Just get like a wire brush, or what I used for my grill. It hasn't been used, so it worked out for me. But if you have a small wire brush, it'll work better. You can get more detailed, but this adds a perfect wood grain to it. It makes it look better than actual wood. Like, I don't use wood sticks if I'm gonna do wood anymore. I use the pink foam and just use the wire brush. An effect here you can do to make your board look a lot better with minimal effort is continue the lines down the side. It'll just give it a little bit of just better quality look. So like I said earlier, I use a lot of techniques that I learned from Black Magic Craft, And this is one of them. This is the black Mod Podge. You just mix black Mod Podge and, regular Mod Podge and black paint. The one thing that I wish I would have done is watered down the brush before doing this. It just evens out the paint a lot better and is way easier to apply. This is my initial brown coat, and it looks a lot lighter on camera than it does in person. It's a darker brown than it looks on camera, but expect to use more paint than you think. I definitely used probably 3 times as much paint as I thought I was going to use just on this one board. So it does take quite a bit of paint because you're adding in all that texture, and the paint's got to seep into all those little spots. So this is the step that's going to make the board really pop. This is the dry brushing. I dry brushed white, yellow, and green, and I did this to add like an aged effect, and it really makes the piece. Do not forget this step. So the black wash is a step that is probably second to the dry brush, but if you messed up on the dry brush by putting too much and you think it's popping too much, this step is what's going to fix that. It will tone down that dry brush, and sometimes you almost want to use too much of the dry brush just to tone it down and make it look alright with the black wash. But this is literally just really watered down black paint. You just spread it on there and let it dry up. Sorry about the shaky hands for this, but this is the final product. As you can tell, my solution for the holes being too big is I put tiny little nails in there, brass nails. But if you remember, there are 350 holes. Not only did this take a long time and annoy my hands, but it's a lot of nails. It's going to cost a decent amount of money, so if you can, just make the hole smaller. But I hope you guys like this. I'm going to make more of these videos every single time I make something, so stay tuned for more. Leave a like and subscribe if you liked it.